All right, good evening. I'd like to call to order the Columbia Heights School Board meeting for December 12th, 2023. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everyone. We'll start with the roll call. Mary, do the roll call, please.
Mueller,
Here.
Palmer,
Here.
Hool,
Here.
Petway,
Here.
Medeiros,
Here.
Granlund, here, Superintendent Stenbeck.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Our mission statement is creating worlds of opportunity for each and every learner. All belong, all succeed. Our core values are community, excellence, collaboration, integrity, respect, courage, and innovation. Next, we'll move on to our agenda approval, adjustments, and announcements. We'll start with the approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda, please?
So moved.
Michelle, and a second?
Second.
Second by Mary. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Next, we have our announcements. For our announcements, December 5th through January 2nd, there is no school. The district office is closed the 25th, 26th, 1st, and 2nd. January 9th at 5:30 p.m. is the school board organizational meeting here in the community room. January 9th at 7 p.m. is a regular school board meeting in the community room. January 15th, there is no school, and January 16th at 5:30 p.m. is a school board work session in the community room. Next, we'll move on to communications to the board. Starting with the citizen and employee representatives, at this time, any citizen or employee may briefly address the school board. The board will listen to the brief remarks, ask clarifying questions, and if desired, request that the administration follow up. The board will not take action, thank you, at this meeting on requests presented at this time, and time will be limited to 3 minutes per speaker. We do have several people who wish to speak to the board today, so if you just give me 1 second, we're going to turn off the live stream. We are back from our citizen and employee representatives. We had 2 people who addressed the board, one related to negotiations with Local 710 and ISD 13. We also had somebody who asked for information regarding the discussions on the decline of math, reading, and science scores, as well as the difference in ethnic and race breakdown for the city versus the district, as well as the district diagram of the Frost Bridge process, and that will be followed up on. So thank you for those of you who addressed the board. Next, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Our consent agenda includes the personnel report from December 12th, the school board minutes from November 14th, 2023, November 21st, 2023, November 28th, 2023, the new and suspended deleted courses as presented at the November 28th school board meeting, and the World's Best Workforce annual report as presented at the November 28th school board meeting, as well as policy second reading, which included 503 student attendance, 505 distribution of non-school sponsored materials, 510 school activities, 522 Title IX sex non-discrimination policy grievance procedure and process, 526 hazing prohibition, 531 the Pledge of Allegiance. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Julie, and a second.
Second.
Second by Laura. Is there any discussion?
Just
Yep. Laura. Jessica.
I just wanted to note that at the last meeting, we had the discussion of the new suspended and deleted courses, and we had requested as a board that we get clear information in the resolution about which courses were being approved. And so I just wanted to note that we have that information now in the consent agenda materials.
Okay, thank you.
and I just have a question about the policies. Did we have any other further input? Because I did not receive any questions.
No, we did not.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we have our acknowledgement of contributions, and that is a resolution. So I will read this. Acknowledgement of contributions resolution, whereas Minnesota Statute 123B.02 permits school boards to receive for the benefit of the district bequest, donations, or gifts for any proper purpose and apply the same to the purpose designated. In that behalf, the board may act as a trustee of any trust created for the benefit of the district and the benefit of the pupils thereof. Therefore, be it resolved by the School Board of Columbia Heights Public Schools Independent School District Number 13 that the school board accepts with appreciation the contributions detailed in the background in the amount of $3,484. A donation of $120 was made to Valley View from Derek Harley from the Minnesota Health Fairview Clinical Informatics for student needs. Donations of $20 were made to the Heights Herald by Riley Conway, Jennifer Piper Muno, Jenny Westerbrooks, and Amy McClanahan. A donation of $33 was made to the Heights Herald by Antonin Anwar. A donation of $100 was made to Heights Herald by Christine Reynolds. A donation of $50 was made to the boys basketball program by Spencer Mary. A donation of $100 was made to the boys swim team by Sunshine Carter. A donation of $1,000 was made to the robotics team by Michael Caruso. Value in kind. A donation of 200 pairs of gloves was made to Columbia Heights High School from John Olson and Rachel Nash for student needs, estimated value of $750. A donation of mittens was made to Valley View from St. Philip's Lutheran Church for student needs, estimated value of $50. A donation of gloves, snow pants, winter coats, and food items was made to the Family Center from Rajnan Tuckrell, Ranu Tandon, and Tara Tuckrell for student needs, value of $587. A donation of 24 cool safety glasses was made to the robotics team from Neil Granlin for team coolness and safety, value of $54. A donation of winter gear was made to Valley View by Marie O'Phelan and Cassie Cheetah for student needs, estimated value of $560. Total fiscal year, thanks, Mary. Total fiscal year 2023-2024 monetary contributions to date is $32,943. Can I get a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Mary, and a second.
Second.
Second by Jessica. Is there any discussion?
As usual,
I want to know what the cool glasses were.
this is what happens when I tell my husband, like, we really just need to, it's important. We should probably, get this out there. And this is what we get: cool glasses. They are actually pretty cool. They do look, a little bit more cool than your basic boxy ones. So thank you to everybody for that, and also shout out to my husband for the giggle during the contributions too. So yeah, it was pretty great.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All right. Thank you to our very generous community members. Since this is a resolution, we'll do a roll call. Mary, we call the roll, please.
Mueller,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Hool,
Aye.
Petway,
Aye.
Medeiros,
Aye.
Granlund, aye.
Resolution passes. Next, we'll move on to our discussion reports and information items, starting with reports from members of the board, and we will start with Mary.
Okay, so it's been a busy couple of weeks. I was able to attend my first Columbia Academy PTO meeting of the year, so that was a lot of fun. Got to discuss some of the things that are coming up for CA, as well as different ways that we can continue to support the students and staff there. So more things to come. I also had the chance to attend the play, the high school play, Cinderella. It was fantastic. I continue to be just in awe of how amazing our students are. And then prior to this meeting, I volunteered at CA in the library today, and also was able to attend Miss Student's, the visitation for Miss Student, and just pass along my gratitude for everything that she has done for our community, and also it was a really wonderful time, as wonderful as it can be. Just a lot of celebration of family there. So.
Yeah, thank you. Jessica.
Sure. So since the last meeting, I had the opportunity, along with Director Palmer, to attend the MSBA Delegate Assembly. And that was a really eye-opening experience to hear the perspectives of other districts across the state on issues that we discuss here at the board table, issues that we also face, and then some ways that we're distinct. And so I really appreciated being able to be part of that process and vote on their legislative positions for the coming year. I also attended the Highland Family Involvement Committee to hear about what teachers and families are planning for engagement for the rest of the year. I also was able to attend the high school musical last weekend, and I took my family, and it really was fabulous. Everybody did such a terrific job, so my kudos to everyone that was involved in the production, from the tech crew to the actors, and all of the staff that helped out. It was really, really, really fun. And then I also attended the subcommittee on community engagement prior to this meeting, and so I think we'll have maybe a report on that later in the meeting. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Michelle?
All right. So I attended Family Engineering Night at North Park. It was a good time. The Works Museum came out, and we did some crafting and building. I made a catapult, and it took a lot of time. I was very strategic about it, and I'm very proud of it. I also attended the BIPOC Family Advisory Committee meeting at North Park, and I attended the Community Resource Fair here at the Family Center, which was a blast. There were a lot of people and families coming out. It was a great experience to meet people in the community. I also attended an activity at the library, at the Columbia Heights Public Library, where my daughter learned about trees and made a wood collage. That was fun. And I attended Cinderella as well at the high school. It was amazing. I'm super impressed. And yes, we have very talented students, so it made me happy. And I also attended the Subcommittee on Community Engagement meeting before this one. That's all I have.
Perfect. Thanks, Michelle. Julie?
I was able to get through the September and October expense and financial report that was submitted. And I just want to point out that it was very timely, and I appreciate that. And I've submitted my questions and the expenses that I'll be looking at, and we'll probably schedule that before the end of the year sometime to come in. I attended a meeting with Lorianne, or Chair Mueller, Superintendent Stenvik, and Director Hannekins to discuss some of the financial report that we'll be seeing tonight. So that's it.
Thanks, Julie. Laura?
Okay, well, I was thinking about it, and I actually had a few things going on. Obviously, the delegate assembly, that's always a great opportunity to get out there and make sure that that our concerns are addressed to the legislature. So the delegate assembly is a great way for school districts to kind of band together to come up with unified voices. And happily, I would like to say that that the vast majority of schools were feeling pretty much the same issues that we are, obviously maybe from a different perspective. But we, at least the priorities going forward are ones that we actually can back. You know, will make things run smoother, give more clarification, so on and so forth. Removing some barriers for being able to accomplish things. There's a lot of good priorities that are in here, and hopefully we can see some changes in the legislature coming in the future. I also attended Cinderella. I actually wanted to do this one last, but I really want to talk about it. It really was good. It was so good. Actually, when I was at work the following day, I was going, and you know what? You know, and they're going to be playing at 2 o'clock this afternoon, so, you know, it's only $6 to get in, you know, so I was trying to even pitch it while I was at work, which was kind of fun, over in Maplewood, and they should have come out because it was really good. And then I also attended the subcommittee on community engagement just prior to this, and I believe we will be reporting in board topics in a little bit more detail on some of the information we discussed.
Great. Thank you very much. Everybody's very busy this time of year. I also attended the community resource event, albeit very briefly. And Mary, did you say that you were there? Mary was there.
but yes, I was. Thank you.
And thanks to Mary, who picked up as I had to leave for a family medical emergency. So I had to bug out a little bit early, but it was so great to see so many families and so many services and connecting them all together. And then I actually had a really great time connecting with some of our high school students that were there who were interpreting. It was really fun to get to know them and what they're doing after graduation, and just making some connections there. So that was a great experience. I also attended Cinderella as well. Every time I attend one of those shows, I always think this is the best one they've ever done, and then the next one's the best one they've ever done. It was really well done, and it was fun to see. And my daughter and I were talking about some of the performers who we saw in their first musical in middle school, and now they're performing through high school and how they've grown. So. Really a great experience for that. So thanks to our students for all the time that gets put into that. I once had a theater kid, so there's a lot of time. And then to the dedicated staff for all of the time and effort they put into that, because it was a great show. Also had conversation with Member Granlin. I had conversation with Superintendent Stenvik. And as Member Hool said, she and I and Superintendent Stenvik and Director Hennekins met prior to this meeting for a pre-audit meeting to go over some of the audit stuff we'll be talking about today. So thank you all for your time on that. Superintendent Stenvik.
A brief report, thank you. Director Stunkel and I have begun meeting with Bob and Susan from CISO to establish the timeline for the strategic plan process. And in January, we will be hosting multiple opportunities for community engagement and input. I was invited to meet the congregation at St. Timothy's Church here in Columbia Heights on Sunday because they collected 51 pairs of winter boots to donate to our students, so I was able to go and accept those. So a huge thank you for their generosity. Also over the weekend, I participated in an American Indian Education Program family excursion to the Minneapolis Institute of Art to tour the Native American exhibit called In Our Hands, which I highly recommend if anyone's interested in that. We did have 10 students participate in the Minnesota State High School League statewide student leadership conference last week. There were 4 breakout sessions on a variety of topics. And just a huge thank you to Jake Henderson and Crystal Vital Schwartz for their leadership in the activities department. We did receive communication from the Minnesota School Board Association acknowledging member Michelle Petway, her completion on the full workshop series, which included phases 1, 2, 3, and 4.
You guys got them.
So just a really big congratulations to Michelle. And sure. Shall we congratulate her in the normal school board fashion?
Yeah, absolutely.
Lorraine, I'll hand this to you.
Hall of Fame.
Yay. I thought I just went to the lunch at the conference and then,
Oh, no.
I think that's the fastest I've ever seen anybody get that done.
honestly.
Yeah. Well, it took me 2 years to get, I know, and you know what? God, that's like the same. Oh, very impressed. Like I said,
Thank you.
Way to go.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
I love to learn.
I do think that is probably the fastest I've ever seen anybody do the all 4.
I can
so.
say it's the fastest I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Well,
That's a
thank
lot of
you.
work.
I didn't know that.
And since our last board meeting, I've had communication with Member Granlin, Member Hool, and Chair Mueller. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Moving on our informational items, we have our FY23 audit. And we have Director Hennekins and Jim Eichin from MMKR. Welcome.
Just give me 1 second to get things pulled up and I'll get going here. All right. Thank you, Chair Mueller, members of the board, and Superintendent Semvik. This evening, I have Jim Eichten with me from MMKR. And before I turn it over to him, I just wanted to say a couple of words about the audit. So this evening, we're presenting the audit from fiscal year 23, so the 22-23 school year. And though some of you are newer to this process, and it can be a quite intensive process over a long period of time. It's our preliminary audit this year started in June, and we're just wrapping things up now here. I mean, we submitted our audited tape before our deadline of November 30th, so it is really a long process, the audit is. And of course, it's not every day, all day, but there's intensive periods during that audit process, and it's multiple staff, so it's really a major part of the department that's working on the audit, and then of course other departments get involved, the superintendent's office, as we're all part of budgets and spending appropriately spending our finances and stretching every dollar as we do for that. So this year we have a new auditing firm. So those that were here before remember Bergen KDV. This year we've moved to MMKR. It is definitely a new process, same process, different process. There's things that are the same, things that are different. Since they're new to us, is a learning curve. So I feel like we're a little bit heavier on questions and digging and getting to know them, getting to know us as a district, which thankfully I have a very strong team. Lee Lohr in particular is the Deputy Director of Finance. She's really the lead on this. And Kelsey Ashes is our accountant, and she also plays an integral role in preparing everything for the audit. So definitely can't do it without the team. And very happy with what I'll just say with fiscal year 23 and how that year turned out for us and financially and how the audit results are. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Jim and just kind of let him reintroduce himself maybe, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Brian. Chairperson, members of the board, superintendent, my name is Jim Eichten with MMKR CPAs. Here this evening to provide a presentation on the audit results for the year ended June 30th, 2023. I'm glad to be the district's auditors. First of all, I've been working in the governmental audit space now for 33 years. Our firm previously worked with the district. I'm not sure how long ago that was, but I've been familiar with the district for quite some time, knowing your organization and some of the individuals that worked here previous to my relationship this year. I'll jump into the audit for this year, just to kind of give you a context as to what the purpose behind the audit is. First and foremost, it is a requirement in state law that the district prepare an annual financial report. That particular financial report is required to be submitted to the Minnesota Department of Education, as well as the Office of the State Auditor in the state of Minnesota. The district actually takes that particular requirement, that particular annual financial statement, and actually prepares what's called an annual comprehensive financial report. They prepare that report and submit it for a Certificate of Achievement and Excellence in Financial Reporting. That particular document is hundreds of pages long. I think I looked it up before. It's about 130 pages. So there's very extensive data and information in that particular document. Beyond those requirements, there are a number of other requirements that the district has to go through related to these financial activities. First and foremost, you're required to have that financial report audited by an independent certified public accountant, which is really my role with the district. As part of that audit process, we're required to audit your annual comprehensive financial report and verify that it's being prepared in accordance with governmental accounting standards. First of all, GASB in this case, Governmental Accounting Standards Board issues standards for governmental audits, as well as, governmental accounting. You all are also required then to follow audit standards that are applied by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, which provides opinions that we're required to perform and issue on your internal controls, as well as a variety of other items. And I'll go through those here in a little bit. Where we are at today with the particular audit report, as you can see in very big red letters, that this is a preliminary draft. In fact, I don't think you received this probably till this morning. Maybe I turned it over at maybe at 9 a.m., something like that. So this is very fresh. So I don't expect anybody to have a deep dive into this. I'm going to touch on it and touch on the highlights of the results. In terms of, the draft of it, I've certainly reviewed those documents and really have provided it to the district for their review. There is a quality review process that's ongoing at my firm, so there's going to be potentially, other questions that come up, hopefully not too many for Brian's sake. But certainly there's an opportunity for the board here to review these documents and provide any sort of feedback that you'd like to provide. That particular feedback would be provided to the superintendent or Brian or both, depending on the nature of your questions. But they'll forward any questions that need answered to me directly if need be. So the information that was provided to you certainly is a copy of that preliminary draft of that ACFR I mentioned. We do provide a series of opinions which are provided as part of the special purpose audit reports. You'll see those documents in the information that was provided, as well as the corrective action plan, which is required anytime there's a finding in an audit. And that particular corrective action plan is provided. The corrective action plan is actually the district's corrective action plan. We assisted in preparing that. And certainly that'll be vetted and verified to make sure that those are the corrective action steps to take. What you see in front of you on the screen is the management report. Now, management report is my document. As an auditor, I put together this management report really to summarize the results of the audit, but also to provide a tool for presentation, make it a little bit easier to look at the audit. You can read the management report potentially and get a real good feel as to how the audit went without looking at a 160-page document. But I do encourage you to look at the 160-page document. It's very exciting, at least for me. So I'm going to run through this as best I can and try to be brief and cover the highlights. So you can see my management report is provided into four parts. There's a summary of the audit. We do provide some financial trends of the funding of public education in Minnesota, some financial trends of your particular district, and I'll get to those in a little bit, and then some accounting auditing updates. Fortunately, the accounting updates page is about one page long right now. 2 years ago, it was probably 4 pages long because there's been some pretty extensive governmental accounting standards that have come up in the last few years, in particular the lease standard, and this year we implemented a standard on IT subscription liabilities. So on the very first page, you can see that there's an audit summary. It provides information on our responsibilities. The scope of the audit really, as Brian mentioned, started in June, and we as a firm really put together an audit plan. In that particular audit plan, we developed a certain set of strategies based on the district and based on information that we have. Anytime we go outside of that particular scope, I'm required to provide information to you on that. As a board, you should know that I ran into something unusual or caused me to divert my plan. That didn't happen. We planned this audit accordingly, and it completed as we planned it out. So that's a good step. The timing of the audit, it is required, as Brian mentioned, to submit the audited data to the Department of Ed by November 30th. And then the state report is required on December 31st. And with the approval of the administration, that'll be timely. We anticipate it'll be timely for this year. So continuing on, the next set talks about the district's financial statements and my opinions on the various documents that I put forth. The first one, you can see that the bullet point is the first opinion. That's an opinion that I issued, including an unmodified opinion on the district's basic financial statements. That particular opinion is best described as a clean opinion. The word unmodified might throw you off, so I like to use the word clean. It was the opinion you were looking for. We were able to issue a clean opinion or an unmodified opinion on that particular document, which is exactly what you were looking for. The second opinion we issue is related to our opinion on the district's internal controls, specifically over financial reporting. And you can see there that we did issue what I would call a reportable item. Going into this audit, I fully understood that the district has limited segregation of duties in the internal controls over the organization, in particular over a few of the cash receipts functions and most notably the payroll transactions. Organizations of your size have that very common. The district has had that for several years. It's a pretty normal reportable item of finding in this nature. So when we did this audit, we understood that. We understood our audit focus, our audit plan was to understand that, hey, we're living in this environment and we're going to be issuing this finding. So as part of our control testing is we look for what I would describe as compensating controls, things that are in place that help you compensate for this limitation. And they can be anything. They can be a variety of things. In fact, I ask people questions like, hey, what type of controls? Frankly, you as a board are one of those compensating controls. You as a board get certain information, you look at certain things, you ask certain questions. That's a control. Are you part of the day-to-day activities of the district? No. But yeah, you are a control mechanism. So I look for things. I look for certain board actions that have taken place, things that are happening at the board level that would help with that particular area. I'm going to jump into this right now when it comes to findings. This is an audit of the district, and it really is intended to be a learning experience. It isn't intended to be detrimental. It is intended solely to help the district get better. So when I look at these findings, I look at it from the standpoint of, well, okay, we have a finding here. What's the next step? What is the corrective action that we're going to take? And the goal, ultimately, with these corrective actions is that I'm not here next year issuing the same finding and coming to the board and say, hey, remember that finding last year? We corrected that. That's no longer a finding. That's the progression we're looking for. When it comes to segregation duties, I don't really recommend that you make a whole change. I mean, it's a place that you're in. To eliminate that particular finding would be costly to the district in terms of personnel. So you tend to live in that space, if you will, but you make sure that you have other controls in place and you continue to look for improvement in controls. And that's what the corrective action plan states if you were to look at it. So I'm going to go on to the next opinion. You'll see the second bullet point there is also our opinion on your district's internal controls, specifically over financial reporting. Again, we issued a finding in this particular opinion specifically related to our audit procedures over accounts payable. During our process, we noted an accounts payable that was not recorded that we determined was material to the financial statements. That particular accounts payable related, in this case, to the I guess you could say expenditures of the intermediate district 916. That particular finding really, if the best way to describe it is, the finding really is the sense of if without me as an auditor being in the room actually helping you with this process, you would have issued a financial statement that was materially misstated, is the best way to look at it. So because I was here, because I did my audit procedures, I found something, I corrected it. That's an internal control weakness. I'm not your accountant, I'm your auditor, and it shouldn't take me to get to correct financial statements. So what's the corrective action plan? Back to my point. What's the corrective action plan? Well, we talked about it in our meeting, in that, the accounting staff was familiar with 916's invoices. They typically come late, which I'm fully aware of. They don't get their invoices out till quite late. So it's just an action item to say to yourself or the finance team we got to remember to make sure we book that payable next year. And that's about it. I mean, it's to the lesser level than really, in my opinion, it's not as large as you can see here. It was one payable out of many that you have. Yeah. So I'm going to move on. The bullet point, next bullet point, we do issue an opinion on your compliance with government auditing standards and really Yellow Book standards. Most of the Yellow Book standards relate to testing of your compliance with laws and regulations as it relates to grants and funding that you're getting. So the district is funded largely by grants, either state, local, or federal grants. And we're required to provide auditing of those particular grants. We work through the MDE to understand much of those parameters. And you can see we didn't have any findings to report in that area. The last bullet on the page talks about the report that we issued on your schedule of expenditures of federal awards. We do an audit as part of this particular process. We issue what's called the single audit of federal awards. A single audit of federal awards is guided by the federal government. It's guided by uniform guidance. You're required to have that any time a district spends more than $750,000 of federal money. You have a total of $9.7 million, so you're clearly in excess of that, and you will continue to be in excess of that particular threshold. I'd be surprised if you ever not. So you are required to go through what's called the single audit of federal awards, and it is extensive. Much of the work that we go through in our audit has to do with the single audit of federal awards. So we did issue an opinion there that the schedule of federal awards that the district prepared was accurate and done appropriately. This bullet point at the top of that page relates to our testing of the internal controls specifically related to those federal grants. A federal award testing is required to have us test internal controls specifically in that space, which is very specific, even broader, more specific than the broader internal controls testing that we do. So we did issue a finding in that particular area related to the district's compliance with inventory of property and the accounting of what I would call capital assets. So as part of the testing that we did this year, we tested, one of the major programs we tested was the Education Stabilization Funds, which is a federal grant that is part of the stimulus packages that came out from the federal government during the pandemic. That particular grant had some element of capital spending, which is unique in the sense of it is not normal for the district to spend federal dollars on capital areas. Generally, the federal dollars are spent in the area of food service. Title I is a very big grant. You have special education grants. Most of those are spent on salaries and benefits. And so when we dived into this particular single audit and we started testing the Education Stabilization Fund, we noticed immediately, oh, you spent some dollars in capital. Well, that just brings you to a whole new checklist of items that you might not have been used to. Just because prior auditors wouldn't even been asking these questions because you didn't spend any money on capital. So when we did this testing, we noted that you didn't really have the internal controls in place to account for that capital testing. Now, how pervasive is it? Well, you really had one fixed asset that you bought that fit the requirement one. And one is one's still a finding. But when you think about all the spending you have and all of the capital that's going on, the accounting there for the capital assets is there, and we certainly audited that. But in the federal space, you have a whole new set of requirements, and it includes being very specific about assets that were purchased with federal dollars. You have to specifically identify them in your records. You have to tag them specifically. You have to have unique, and there's more to it than that, but I don't need to get into all that detail. The basis behind all that, frankly, is this. If you were to sell that particular item, the proceeds have to go back to the federal government, which is why they have you do that. That if it were of any value, you would have to give it back, which is kind of the point of the whole thing. So what's the corrective action plan? Well, you already took care of it. Brian stated the other day, they've found the process for accounting for it. They're being included in the capital asset records in a unique way, as well as they'll be doing an inventory that's required on a biannual basis. So, and I'm going to jump to those last two bullet points. So, and then I'll open it up for questions before I get to the next sentence. So the second bullet point on that page, we do issue opinion as well on your compliance with the spending, if you will, the direct and material effect of the major program in terms of compliance. We didn't issue an opinion, or we didn't have any findings related to that compliance. And that's important, to be honest. Typically, when you have findings with controls, you also have findings with compliance, because if controls are weak, they tend to lead to compliance exceptions. Well, in this case, we had a finding that said your controls were weak, but we didn't have any findings related to compliance. Everything, you complied with all the requirements as it relates to these federal grants, which is important differentiation. Lastly, we issue an opinion on your compliance with Minnesota laws and regulations. The Office of State Auditor in the state of Minnesota provides us with a list of the laws that we test. We don't audit every Minnesota law that pertains to the school district, only the ones on the list. And the list changes depending on exciting findings that they find at the State Auditor's Office, and then they add them to the list. And you can see we didn't have any findings in that area. So that's really the crux of the first part of an audit, which is the compliance and exception findings. And really, in my mind, you have two findings and one really notable reportable item. So I'm going to, first of all, stop right there and open it up for questions on the findings portion. Anybody have any questions on the findings?
Julie?
So from page 1, you mentioned you have a significant deficiency in the segregation of duties space. Is that a bunch of control deficiencies that rolled up to the SD, or is that just two? I'm trying to understand, do we have like 15 control deficiencies that were below scope and you guys were able to eliminate them, or were you rolling them up and that's where that became an SD?
Boy, that's a great question, and it's coming from somebody that's very knowledgeable, I can tell.
This is what I do for a living.
I think they made that clear to me. There's a lot of control exceptions, in that area. Specifically to the cash receipts, there's multiple locations that's occurring, and probably the biggest one is payroll. Payroll is a pretty significant portion of this school district in terms of volume. I mean, it's almost 80% of the activities. So when you just, on a base level, put payroll when you don't have payroll segregated appropriately, that becomes a pretty significant, area of concern in that area.
So in your testing of internal controls over financial reporting, did you not include testing of mitigating controls?
No, we did.
Okay, so did we not have mitigating controls that were sufficient to cover off on the SOD? I'm just kind of trying to understand a little bit.
Well, we certainly have, they have compensating controls, as I mentioned, but there is a limitation. The structure of those controls are not in place even to get you there, even as a starting point.
Okay,
Does that
that's
make
good.
sense? Yeah.
On the material weakness, did you document a root cause of that? I understand what happened, but what would you say was the limitation in the control? Was that a technical issue in our team? Do we need more training? what was the, I understand the reason for it. I mean, you obviously found that we weren't accruing an expenditure by estimating appropriately. So is that, would you consider that just a lack of training on our team's part in understanding how to do that, an accrual of that nature? Or was that more of a, I don't know, just not understanding GASB, can you explain a little more what the root cause of the deficiency is?
Right, and I'm assuming you're talking about this internal control on the, this one right here on internal controls.
Page 1, the material
Yeah,
weakness.
okay. I just want to be clear which one you're referring to. So in that case, to me, that was just an oversight by staff. I believe if you were to ask the staff, do they understand they should have done this? Absolutely. I think even the reaction at our exit conference was, oh gee, in the past, we used to book an estimate for that. And we just didn't do that. And it was just a human error. Was the systems in place? Absolutely, from our observations.
Okay. When you did your risk assessment, where did you consider the focus of highest risk in our district?
Yeah, so when you go to the engagement letter that we sent out, I don't know if you get, as a group, you would have, somebody would have, you'll see that the risk assessment is revenue recognition would have been one of the key areas, as well as capital asset recording of the capital assets were the 2 risk assessments. And that's included in the engagement letter if you were to look at it.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Oh, sorry. The question is, what is there's a risk assessment standard that, as I mentioned, the plan, scope, and timing of the audit part, we do a risk assessment before we get started. We look at the district and we do a risk assessment of where are the highest risks in this organization. And we are required to communicate that to the board, so it's actually in your engagement letter. When I prepare an engagement letter for this audit, it's included in that engagement letter, what were my highest risks. And the biggest risks that we have certainly are revenue recognition is one of those. Making sure you recorded revenue correctly. All of us probably are aware that it's very complex. School district accounting and financial reporting, both on all together, but even revenue recognition is very challenging. So that's a high risk area in this particular audit, and most audits, frankly. The other area that we have a concern with, in a risk assessment, is capital asset reporting and making sure that the capital assets are reported correctly. By definition, the single audit of federal awards is high risk, but that's by default, actually. You can't go into a single audit without a high risk assessment. It's just high risk. So sorry about it.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
And I have one more question.
Of course, yeah.
Did our team at all do a fraud risk assessment, or did you guys do a fraud risk assessment at all?
Well, we
As a
certainly did do a fraud risk assessment.
I'm sorry, what was that?
We certainly did. The firm did an assessment of fraud. We did fraud interviews throughout the organization as part of the process. I'd have to look at my file to determine who on this board I did. Was it chairperson? You were part of that interview process? I know the superintendent was interviewed, Brian was interviewed.
Yep.
Anybody that was in the federal program space was interviewed. That's a required element of my audit. Yep.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Other questions with part 1? Michelle?
I just want to say thank you for explaining it the way you did, because it's a lot, and
There's a lot.
the way you're explaining it is amazing, so thanks.
I'll move on, if that's okay. So the second part of the audit really is the financial results of the organization. And in this document, we do have some financial results. And we start with this particular page, which is, I don't know if you're following along, page 6. This particular this graph is really a 10-year graph showing the operating expenditures as a percentage of expenditures, the statewide fund balance as a percentage of operating expenditures as a formula. That particular formula is widely used in school district accounting and reporting. In fact, it's the base number that the Minnesota Department of Education uses for defining a district and statutory operating debt. So we put this particular graph together to show two things. The first particular graph shows the yellow graph is the statewide fund balance as a percentage of expenditures. If you take every school district in the whole entire state and you do the math on that, you see the yellow graph. What stands out in that yellow graph, as you can see, is almost straight, almost the identical percentage for much of the early, from 2014, actually 15, all the way through 2019. The fund balance was almost 20% statewide as a percentage of our statewide expenditures. Once the pandemic hit, you can see that that fund balance actually went up and increased. It's a little counterintuitive why that would have been during a pandemic, but ultimately the spending, the ability to spend during the pandemic was significantly less. And so fund balances actually went up as a result of spending being less, and the aid was still coming because you were, in essence, teaching students. In 2022, you see after some post-pandemic, it's starting to go down, and I shouldn't guarantee you, my expectations are that it will continue to go down, just based on what I see every day doing these audit reports. It is going downward, most notably around the federal dollars. There was a lot of federal monies coming out to local governments, including school districts, and those dollars are waning. And once those dollars kind of are wane, we're finding many districts in challenging environments. So the blue particular percentage there is the district's percentage. I don't have a lot of history here, so I look at that particular graph and look at some pretty stable environments from 2014 through 2019, which is the high point of that particular graph. And then you see a couple of years where you went down in 2020, 2021, and really the low point in 2022. For the year that I audited, that particular percentage has increased up to 6.8%, and I actually have some other graphs later that'll kind of show what happened with the financial results related to that, as well as kind of some benchmarking that you as a board use and the district uses related to that particular item. So my management report also provides some data specifically to spending on a governmental funds basis. This particular graph shows the district's governmental funds revenues on a per student basis. Now, these include all of the district's governmental funds, which includes both the general fund, the food service fund, community service fund, as well as your debt service fund. You can see in 2023, the district's revenues per student was $17,932. When you look at 2022 compared to both the statewide averages and the metro area averages, you can see that your revenues are less than the averages, both statewide and metro area. And that is the case for 2021 as well. I expressed this to the superintendent in our EXA conference that this is generally not something we normally see. It's almost expected, frankly, that you might be below the metro area averages, but to be below the statewide averages is a place that is really challenging, frankly. You're getting significantly less revenue than your competitors, if you will. I hate to use the word competitors, but your neighbors maybe. But even broader communities, the revenues of that level is very challenging for you, and you're living in a difficult place when it comes to that. Other areas that stand out in that particular graph is you can see in 2023, the revenues were very stable from 17,920 to 17,930. Most of the increases were in state aid, in particular state special education aid increases in that area. You can see your property tax levy went down in 2023. One other area, and actually I'll address it on the next graph in particular for that one. But so we do also then give the flip side of that equation, the governmental funds expenditures on a per-student basis. So the district spends $17,713 per student. The general fund spends $15,500 per student. Again, you can see that those particular percentages, those dollar amounts, are actually, in this case, for 2022, were below the averages when it comes to total, but just slightly above statewide averages in 2022, and again in 2021. One of the things that I would suggest that when I look at that graph is you typically see them pretty much the same. If revenues are below averages, then expenditures are below averages as well. So to see expenditures actually above, somewhere in between, it stands out to me that could be a concern going forward long term, that they're not at the same levels. So you can see that particular graph, some of the things that stand out in particular, I'm looking at the elementary and secondary regular instruction, which is pretty much the dollars that go directly into the classroom. You can see that those dollars actually were almost $300 less per student. There's a reason for that the district did make some cuts during this year, and you can see it right there on the page when you look at it. The other number that I wanted to point out at this presentation, it relates to debt service. When you look at that debt service number, the district is spending $780 per student. That particular number is almost half of the other organizations. $1,500, $1,600. That is actually a good thing. You have less debt than your comparable. You're fiscally managing your debt service well. And to have that low number is really an opportunity to spend more money in the classroom, frankly, which is where we hope most dollars go. So I'm going to move forward then to the district-specific information and go over individual fund data. So this particular graph shows the general fund's financial position over the last 10 years. It does show your cash position net of any short-term borrowing. And then it shows your fund balance, the unrestricted fund balance, which is typically used as an analysis tool. At the end of for June 30th, 2023, the district's fund balance did increase about $1 million from one year to the next. The district's budget that was amended or revised projected about $100,000 increase, so it's about $900,000 better than was in the final budget. And I'll show you how that occurred, but most of that has to do with the revenue side of the equation. You receive more revenues than expected mainly in the special education area. I'll be honest, most of the time that particular category is somewhat hard. It's very challenging to determine. So the fact that you are off in that particular category to me is not surprising at all. It's almost expected. If you got it right, I would be surprised. So anyway, you can see there that the yellow graph did go up. One of the things that I noted on that particular graph is the blue line, which is your cash and investments net of that short-term borrowing. And you can see in 2022 that was below the line. Why I point that out is important because actually it's on the next graph, I think. Yeah, I'll show that on the next graph. But the question might be asked, why do we have fund balance? Why do we need fund balance? Well, the answer is right there. If you don't have equity, if you don't have a fund balance position, your cash flow can be challenging. And without action taken to utilize short-term borrowing, you would have had deficit cash. So the fund balance, which is really the low point of fund balance over that 10-year period, you can see what happens. What can happen is you had deficit cash, frankly. So that's an important kind of indicator when I looked at it. This particular, this is on page 10, is a graph showing the fund balances, the equity positions by category. You can see that at the end of the year, the fund balances did increase by that $1 million I referenced. The unrestricted fund balance is a percentage of operating expenditures, which is the percentage, the second one on that page, is actually the percentages used in the district's fund balance policy. So the board has a fund balance policy. It's actually referenced right here. I noticed I have a bad percentage in there, by the way. Did you notice that?
I told Lee, she should be sending it to you.
I noticed it in my car when I was coming in here. Uh-oh, I'll not.
Message her.
There you go. The year we ended the year at 6.8%. Your fund balance policy states that the policy states that the school board will strive to maintain an unrestricted general fund balance of between 6 and 12%. So that gives you some sort of context as to where you're at. Last year you were at 4.2, which is even outside of the boundaries. And then now you're at 6.8, which is actually at the low end of that particular policy, which you're within the policy, which is important to know, right? It's a good place to be. So I'll jump on forward. I don't need to touch on that one. So I wanted to give some sort of context here, and it's important aspect of an audit. This particular graph is showing the general fund revenues, and you can see that the breakdown of the revenues, but probably most importantly to me is a couple of items related to the budget. So the district's actual results were within $863,000 of the final budget. So you received $860,000 more revenues than in the budget, which was 1.5%. You're a $57 million organization, and to complete the year at within 800,000 is very, very good. And Julie's over here giving the thumbs up, and I agree with her wholeheartedly. And the reason I say that is because I will say this every time I sit here, so you'll hear it again. And it's really important. This audit is holding true to your budget. Why is that meaningful to you? You have made decisions over the last 12 months over and over and over again based on that budget and based on the information you're getting. And to have me come here and say, yeah, all those decisions were good because the financial results held true is so important to your board. If I come here and say, oh, by the way, you missed it and it's way off, you question everything that you're getting. And that's an important aspect of this audit, is to know that I can be confident that the data I'm getting is going to hold true at the audit results. And that can't even be more spelled out even more than when you look at this particular graph, which is the graph of the general fund expenditures. Your total expenditures are $56 million in the general fund, and your actual expenditures was off by $97,000. I mean, that, to be true, you can't even get that close if you tried. And you tried. So that's pretty unusual, frankly, to be that close. My experience isn't that great, but that's wonderful. Now, Ryan holds back some on that because he says there's some ups and downs in there that net it out. But it's true, but still, the fact that you're that close on a $57 million organization, that's really good. So kudos to the staff and whoever's involved in the budget process, including the board. So I'm going to move forward to last couple items. Here you have some information on your food service fund and your community service fund. Food service fund at the end of the year did increase by roughly 211,000, or excuse me, it was a decrease of 211,000. At the end of the year, the food service fund has a operating a fund balance that equates to about 43% of operations, which is a healthy position to be in. It wasn't always that way. There's some pandemic-related funding going on here that really made most of the food service funds statewide look like this. So that's a good place for you to be. Most school districts are working on capitalizing on that by pushing some of the capital-related items for food service into that fund instead of having them paid by the general fund. So that's one. And then you have the community service fund here. You can see that it went down slightly, a decrease of about 4,500, and that equates to about 6.4, which is very similar to the general fund's fund balance percentages. This particular fund has been, I guess, globally been hurt dramatically by the pandemic from most school districts. And you're actually holding steady pretty well, given what I've seen in some others. That's doing pretty well. 135 is not a lot of fund balance. That's pretty minimal, so there's not a lot of cushion there. Yeah, but it is where it's at. So this page does actually talk about some other funds. I'm not going to get into those too much. You have a capital fund, you have a debt service fund, you have an internal service fund, and there's an OPEB fund, which has about $5 million in it. So, and I don't need to touch on all that. So all in all, that's the end of the presentation. All in all, the district did an exceptional job of completing the audit process. It was very vibrant. As Brian suggested, first time through, any time through audits like this are challenging on all fronts. It gets easier as we learn about the district. But to me, you passed with flying colors in terms of the audit results and the findings. There are some findings in terms of that, and in my experience or my opinion, they've already been taken care of. The corrective action plans have already been put in place, and they've been already corrected as we sit here today. Financially, the results are good and improved. You're in a challenging position for sure as a district, and you have minimal fund balance, but certainly something going in the right direction is a good thing. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions that you might have for me.
Great, thank you. Questions? Jessica?
I do have a question related to the language on minimum fund balance on page 10. I just found, the language looks correct, but it is kind of confusing to me to read, so I just want to make sure I understand, because my understanding and what I heard you say is that we are within our fund balance policy for 2023. But there's two ways that that's measured right on that chart. So there's the percentage as a total of general fund operating expenditures. There's also a percentage as a total of the general fund expenditures. Our school board policy is based on the general fund operating expenditures.
Correct.
And that is the 6.6?
8%.
So that is within policy.
Yes.
But the way that this is written, when I first read it, I thought, oh no, like our fund balance is 4.4%, because then it goes on to talk about what we would need to do to implement procedures to stabilize that. So I don't know if it's a question, but maybe just a comment. I just want to make sure that I'm clear on that we're
You wanna take
we're
this one?
within our fund balance policy.
Let me take this one. First of all, the 4.4% you see right here, that's an error.
Is that the error you were talking about?
That is the error. And so you quickly identified a very important question, that 4.4% should say 6.8%. And we will correct that with the
Okay.
final documents.
Thank
So
you.
you're absolutely correct in how you would be confused about that.
Okay.
Because it is not 4.4, it's 6.8.
Thank
So-
you. And so we are within our
You can
fund
see where the
balance for
4.4 came
2023.
from above.
Correct. So I
Yes.
was trying to understand how important a distinction was between general fund operating expenditures
Yeah.
and general fund expenditures. So, thank you. That answers my question.
We can explain that, but I don't think I need to.
Yeah.
If the answer in this case is that it's an error, then I don't need additional context, but thank you.
Good question. Great observation. Thank you.
Mary?
I think I have less of a question and more of a comment. Thank you so much for this. This is really helpful. As, outside of the boardroom, I'm a social worker, and the joke is I'm not good at math. That's why I do social work. So I really appreciate the questions you had, Julie, and your explanation of all of these things. I also just want to say a quick, I just want to give my gratitude to the district staff, because there was an error like last year, and that's sort of how we saw the fund balance, and the staff, district staff, superintendent, you guys all worked very, very hard to correct that, and to see it come up to 6.8 in the year from the things, all of the work that you've done to help write that. It's wonderful. I think as a community member too, for me, I really appreciate the fact that we, as a district, have been so fiscally responsible in trying to bring that up and doing it in a way as much as possible that doesn't impact the students as far away from the classroom as possible. So thank you all for your diligence in this and helping get that back to our fund balance policy. So,
Thank you.
Julie?
Brian, I just want to make a comment as well, because we really appreciate, I know what it's like to go, first of all, audit, and second of all, being demanding in that audit. You know, you have to be there a lot of hours, and I just want to congratulate you and your staff for getting this done timely, and I just want to thank you for the time you did put in. I know financial compensation can only go so far but you need the kudos, and I believe you deserve them. Thank you
you.
so much.
Thanks.
Excellent, thank you. Other questions? Director Hennekins, will you just briefly let the board know what they will have in their packets on Friday?
Yeah, so in your Friday packet will be all the other documents. So with the management letter in board book, and then the rest of the documents will be in the board packet that you guys will get on Friday. So anything that was referenced earlier will come in your board packet.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep.
Just so they know what they can expect a
Yep.
160-page
Yep.
document.
Yay. Nighttime reading.
Yep. And if you have any questions, let Julie know.
that was like almost under the radar. Nicely done. Nicely
Just,
done.
just kidding.
And
Julie.
finally, I want to thank you, Mr. Egton. Thank you so much for this presentation. I like the format very much. And I just want you to know it's unique, and I really enjoy it. It's easy to read.
Well, thank
So
you.
thank you.
Appreciate that.
Great. Thank you. Perfect. All right, thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Jim.
And I'm sorry, Director Hennekins, we will do an acceptance of the audit at our January meeting. Is that
Yes,
correct?
at the January meeting.
So there'll be an action
Yep.
item
Thank you.
at our
Thank you for
January
that.
meeting.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mine next. Mine next.
Yep, you are next. We have, hold up, the district's annual budget hearing, our truth and taxation hearing.
Just give me, Chair Mueller, members of the board, and Superintendent Stenbeck, just give me 1 second to pull that presentation up. Share it. Oops. Okay. All right, thank you, Chair Mueller, members of the board, and Superintendent Stenbeck. So this evening, this next item is our public meeting for taxes payable 2024. And our mission, Columbia Heights Public Schools, creating worlds of opportunity for each and every learner, all belong, all succeed. And our core values of community, excellence, collaboration, integrity, respect, courage, and innovation, all aligning with the Columbia Heights Public Schools Board of Education Equity Statement. So this evening, for this meeting, I'm going to go through a background on property tax levies, legislative changes that affect the 2024 levy, information on school funding and district budget, the proposed taxes for payable 2024, estimated impact on taxpayers, Minnesota property tax refunds, and then time at the end for comments and questions. Minnesota Truth and Taxation Law, so this is a law that guides us through this process, requires that we have a meeting that's held, it's a public meeting that may now be held at a regular scheduled meeting. So prior to 2009, it had to be held as a separate meeting. So this is discussion of property tax levies for taxes payable 2024. and again, review the current budget, must be discussed at the meeting, so that's why I'm reviewing that. And the levy must be adopted at the same meeting, so later in this meeting, we have the payable 2024 levy certification, which the board received the information on the preliminary levy prior and approved the preliminary levy prior to the end of September, as we're guided to do. And we must allow for public comment and question at the end. So first, I want to kind of talk about the levy cycle. We can see at the top in the black, the legislation. So that legislative session that ended in May. So that's when all of these or potential changes happened during that legislative session. So it was a very active legislative session. So then in that August to September, things really change a lot in the beginning there, but we have to put out a preliminary levy. We're monitoring it daily, and then the board is approving that preliminary levy, but things can still change. That's why we approve the max, so that as things change, we can adjust with those things. And then when it comes to the December time, we do this truth in taxation, and then we certify that final levy. Also, of note for us, this year, not every year, but note you have November elections, so there's potential of something that could change on that levy. And that really, after the proposed levy, your levy can exceed that proposed levy, except for if you have a voter-approved change, which we did have a voter-approved change, a voter-approved operating levy. So then this is payable 2024, so then that money is collected in 2024. You can see the city, they run a calendar year, so they're taking that money and using it in that calendar year. They run a calendar year. Well, we don't run a calendar year. So we start using those funds then for next fiscal year, so the 2024-2025 school year. So that's kind of how that levy cycle works for us. So I apologize for a lot of reading on this, but again, these are the things that we go through every year and are required to go through. So background on this is assessors, we all know this. Assessors determine the property's estimated value, market value, and assign a property class to each parcel. The county auditor calculates the net tax capacity for each parcel in the community, as well as the total net tax capacity for each taxing jurisdiction. Lots of words. A property's net tax capacity is determined by multiplying the property's market value by the relevant class rate. And the class rates are set by statute, vary by property type, and are uniform statewide. Then the local tax rate of the taxing jurisdiction is determined by dividing the jurisdiction's total levy by the jurisdiction's taxable net tax capacity. And that net tax capacity is important for a capital projects levy because we receive, I forget the decimal exactly, but 5.676% times the net tax capacity. So as the net tax capacity goes up, our capital projects levy our revenue from that actually goes up a little bit as that net tax capacity goes up. So, and then each jurisdiction is setting its own levy and follows specific limits by state law. The county auditor divides the final levy by the district's net tax capacity or referendum market value to establish rates. The county auditor applies those rates to each parcel and prepares the final statements for mailing. The Minnesota Department of Education will set the maximum levy limit for each school district based on current legislation and formulas. And the school board adopts a proposed levy in September, as I said earlier, holds a public meeting, then finalizes the levy amount in December, holding public meeting, and then we'll finalize the levy later in this meeting. So, school district's tax levy must be voter approved or set by state law. So, and what we can voter approve is also, we're guided by state law legislation on what we can actually approve. So really guided by the state. So legislative changes, the big legislative changes that affect the levy directly, the biggest ones, the formula allowances. So the first formula allowance has already been applied for the 23-24 school year. And you can see that for the 24-25 school year, we're going to go to $7,281 per adjusted pupil unit. And then there really isn't any additional legislative changes affecting this pay levy, major ones. And we've seen this before. We've showed this to the board before. We show this a lot, that inflationary adjustment. So what we're actually receiving per pupil, and if it was adjusted for inflation, what it would actually be. So We don't have a data for 2024 yet. So you can see that in 2023, we received $6,863 per pupil. If you adjusted that by inflation, since 2003, we'd be at $8,126 per pupil. So obviously not keeping pace with that. Heading into the next section of talking about the district budget, the school district is required to record revenues and expenses in different funds. You saw that in the audit presentation. You have the general fund, we have the food service fund, community education fund, debt service. So we have varying funds that we have to record that in. So, the general fund, you see levy and other revenue, state aid revenue, other revenue in that fund, daily operating costs, salaries and benefits, utilities. You have the local operating levy, that referendum levy that goes into there. You see health and safety in that category, transportation, capital expenditures in that general fund. There's all pieces that receive, levy and other revenue in those areas. Food service, there is no levy. Food service is primarily federally funded. Now, with the way Minnesota state legislation changed with universal meals, it changed a little bit. For our district, hasn't changed a lot because of our level of free and reduced and direct certification qualifies us for a federal program. So we're really still primarily funded by the federal program. Community education fund comes both levy and state aid and others, because it's a fee-based system heavily. So, and that's based on the adult population in the district. And so early childhood levy is based on the number of children under 5 years of age. So that's kind of really where that levy was. And we brought to the board at one point an adjustment to the population, that census. I think the board may remember that, which just allowed us to receive that additional revenue because our population actually went up, and it went up by a significant amount. So that adjusted that levy. It's not a lot of money. I believe it was like $1,300 additional in levy revenue, but it is impactful to that program, as you can see in the previous presentation in the audit and as Mr. Eichten mentioned, community service funds across the state have been hit particularly hard with the pandemic. And so, every little bit counts, helping support that programming. And then I mentioned debt service, so debt for service is levy. So, we're asking the voters, it pays the principal and interest for those building projects that were approved by voters. But it also, is related to those health and safety funds, which is packed into long-term facility maintenance funding. So there's a levy component to that. So the fiscal year 2023-2024 budget, we just saw a presentation on that, but as you can see, as this is broken down, you have the general fund, you can see the total revenues for the general fund, you can see the property tax revenue, the state aid revenue. So again, most of our revenue does come from state aid. And then the total revenue for the district, just over 59 million, food service, community education. And so when you include all those funds, in the audit tonight, we focused a lot on general fund because that's really where we're looking at that fund balance. But when you look at all those funds, about a $67 million, almost $68 million budget with all funds. And then on the expense side, again, you can see our expenses, salaries and benefits, purchase services, supplies, capital expenditures, debt service, and miscellaneous. So those are the general categories. And again, you can see those expenses in this fiscal year, 23-24. We're proposing again an increase into the fund balance. And as in the previous audit you heard, we did inch our way into our fund balance policy, but we're still barely there, and it doesn't take much to put us back in a harder position in cash flow borrowing. And so you can see that total funds of $66,700,000 approximately in expenditures, $67,700,000 in revenue. So a little bit of increase into that fund balance again. And this is just the budget publication, which kind of shows that FY23 beginning balance, fund balances in all funds. And then you can see a lot of this comes from the OPEB trust that we have for outstanding, for future benefit costs of retirees. And then they got FY23 actual expenditures, revenues and expenditures. And then June 30th, 2023 actual fund balances. So again, as previously presented, we increased in our fund balance, saw an increase. And then you can see the projected, again, revenues, which we just went over in the previous slide, expenditures, and the projected fund balances. So as we do every year, what are our revenues by fund in a pie chart? So you can see, almost 88% of the revenues come in the general fund. And so that's, obviously the most important for operations of the general education of our student district. And then expenses, of course, almost mirror those revenues. So we don't want to see the general fund revenues less than the general fund expenses, because then we're going the wrong way in fund balance. So here's the proposed taxes for 2024, payable 2024. So there's two notes on this. One, of course, right away, you can see a large percent increase in the referendum. So that's the voter approved. So, but then there's another component to that, and that's our increased enrollment. So remember, this is a per pupil revenue. So as enrollment goes up, that will go up a bit as it'll follow the enrollment. So as it goes down, it goes down. So when we saw earlier, when we were presenting the audit, you saw that there was a down, we saw the levy went down. Well, the levy went down because our enrollment went down in 21 and 22, or in 21 in particular. And so now we saw a revenue or an additional 105 students or 103 point some students last year. So now we're seeing an adjustment for that on this levy. So, things don't come to us right away in a lot of instances. So because we received more students than what we anticipated through, what we saw with this immigration moving into Columbia Heights, then now in the levy, we're going to see that additional revenue. We're going to see that adjustment. So, so that's why we see that number of 2.1 million in additional there. And so throughout this, anything that's related to enrollment or has a formula enriched or enrollment that's a per pupil, we're going to see an increase on because of those adjustments from that increased enrollment from the previous year. So, and then the capital project referendum, that's where we see that net tax capacity increase. So that's what's bringing that number up. And then, so then you can see down at the bottom the total adjustment, and you can see a 30.25% increase. So again, most of that is from the operating levy approval, and then the rest of that is really driven off of enrollment increase adjustments from the previous year, and then the increase in net tax capacity. So factors that cause property tax changes, I've already talked about this, voter approved referendums, changes in enrollment, 1 and 2, levy adjustments from prior years, legislative changes in market values, then again, that net tax capacity, changes in class and rate history. So this is just kind of going over what I just went through, the main areas of increase or change. So the referendum portion, the local optional, which is, let me just go to this, do it this way. So the referendum, so again, the increase in student count, and then there's the revoke and replace of the 30893 operating authority and replacing with 827. Local optional revenue, again, that's driven off of the increase to student count. That's the adjustment there. Equity revenue, so once we pass that operating levy, our equity revenue changes. And it'll decrease. So the more we have on the operating levy, the less we're going to have on the equity revenue. Capital project referendum, again, due to large increases in property values. Operating capital, again, enrollment changes and state funding, so there was slight changes in the state funding formula there. And then general adjustments, again, enrollment, and changes in property valuations, as I mentioned. So the estimated impact following other charts, we'll just kind of go through the charts. So this first one is property tax comparison for the pay 2023 versus the pay 2024. So the pay 2023 in blue, the pay 2024 in yellow. So this is the market value of homestead residential property. So this is if property values don't change. Well, we know property values are going to change. So we assume a 10%. So this is a 10%. So it assumes the estimated district rate of growth at approximately 10% of the median home value within the school district. So you can see the numbers are a little bit different. So as that property value increases. This is the market of a non-homestead residential property. Whoops. This one is the one I'm looking. Okay, sorry. Market value of commercial industrial property. And then market value of 4 or more apartment units or property. We didn't include agriculture. We know in our district we don't have a lot of farmland or any. And then we didn't include, we don't have a lot of cabins and lakes in our properties, so, or within Columbia Heights either. So we're pretty landlocked within the city here. So we included, residential apartments and commercial for that reason. So Minnesota property tax refunds. So there's 2 different tax refund programs available at the state. Minnesota property tax refund, the special property tax refund. And of course we have the M1PR form to complete for that. And if you need help, instructions, obviously your tax professional or the Minnesota Department of Revenue has some information. You can give them a call, and then taxes.state.mn.us.
Right. Questions and comments? And at this time, anybody in the audience as well, this is our truth and taxation hearing, so comments are open at this time for anybody in the audience as well. Julie?
Director Hannekins, so food service dollars are all very much federal dollars. Is there an option? For instance, now that the state has, I'm just curious, now that the state has said everybody in school gets free lunch, breakfast, et cetera, can we get away from a federal audit if we move that to the state?
Unfortunately, we can't. And we're a community eligible school or program, or community eligible program is what it's called. If our direct certification, our free and reduced, so people that are direct certified from the county right away, number is high enough, we're required to participate in that program. And so we've enrolled, we've gone through the process. And so for this year, that's where we're at. And I think it locks us into that program for 3 years. And then it'll reassess depending on where our direct certification is. As long as we're in that program, and it was part of the legislation that if your school was eligible, then they do not qualify for the universal meals dollars from the state. So we really don't have an option in that aspect. We are still right with the feds on food service.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Anything from the audience?
Thank you.
Director Hennekins. Next, we will move on to our action items. We're just going to keep rolling with Director Hennekins for a while here. So we've got our 2023 pay 2024 levy.
Give me a second to. Figure out what's. There we go. My computer just decided not to like me very much, so bear with me. There we go. I don't know what happened there. Okay. All right. I'll make this bigger in a second. All right. So this is, thank you, Chair Mueller, members of the board, and Superintendent Stenbeck. So as I stated earlier, we reviewed through Truth and Taxation what our levy is. And so this evening, I'm seeking certification of that levy. And again, just to quickly run through it in the categories, which you did just see, we have our general fund and in those areas. And you can see, again, that large referendum the referendum area was the largest increase under that general fund, and that was that revoke and replace. And again, we saw that increase enrollment, so we're seeing those adjustments. You can see the community service fund. There was a slight decrease in that, and part of that is to do with expenses from prior year and adjustments. Part of the community fund, we estimate what our expenses are going to be, and we get reimbursed the following based on those expenses. So if we overestimated in those expenses, then we see a negative adjustment. And so we did see a negative adjustment in there. So you can see that levy going down a little bit. And again, our debt service, pretty stable. So overall, that 30.25%. So again, this evening, seeking approval of the board to certify the 2024 levy, pay 2024 levy.
Great. Thank you, Director Hankins. Can I get a motion to a motion to certify the 2023 payable 2024 levy as presented?
So moved.
Julie, and a second.
Second.
Second by Michelle. Any discussion? I think we've had a lot of discussion on this. So, hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Thank you. And
Thank you.
we'll stick with Director Hennekins again for the Highland roof bid.
Thank you, Chair Mueller, members of the board, and Superintendent Stenbeck. So the Highland roof bid was presented to the school board at the November 28th meeting. So we received bids on November 21st. And as presented at the previous meeting, we're seeking approval to move forward with the Garland Company's recommendation of McPhillips Brothers Roofing as the lowest responsible bidder with a base bid of $485,000. And this will be funded through long-term facility maintenance dollars.
Great, thank you. Can I please get a motion to award the bid to McPhillips Brothers Roofing for the Highland Elementary Roof Project, Section A?
So moved.
Laura, and a second.
Second.
Second by Mary. Any discussion? I have one item of discussion. As has happened before, I do have a professional relationship with one of the bidders, not the bidder who is being recommended, but one of the others, so I will be abstaining from the vote. Okay. Any other discussion? All right. Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? I abstain. Motion carries. Thank you. And we'll keep going, Director Hennekins. We have the Student Transportation Services request for quote authorization.
Thank you, Chair Mueller, members of the board, and Superintendent Stenbeck. So transportation services, we've been with our current provider for quite a few years. We've extended the contract with them. We direct negotiated last year. And that was all based off of where we were at with COVID, when that provider started with us, and how we were coming out of that. And typically, we would look for requests for proposal, requests for quotes from transportation service providers every 2 years. And our contracts typically are 2 years, and then they have authorizations for extension for 1 or 2 one-year periods. And so this year gives us the opportunity and the timing to go out and seek what other providers have. So this evening, I'm asking for authorization to publish legal notice in the paper from the board to go out for those requests for quotes from transportation providers for the next school year, the 24-25 school year.
Great. Thank you. Can I get a motion to authorize the publishing of legal notice of solicitation of quotes for student transportation services?
So moved.
Julie, and a second.
Second.
Second by Jessica. Any discussion? Laura?
And this is, I'm sorry, it's been a really long meeting. You did say that this is something that we need to do on a regular basis. It's not.
Yeah, we do have the authority to directly negotiate with our current provider. We did do that last year. And so now we've been with our provider now 4 going on 5 years. So it is time for us to see what else is out there. I don't see our rates significantly changing and going down. Costs are going up. So I'm hopeful that there's competition out there enough that we can see a slower increase in that area, because transportation is our highest, or almost our highest. It's our second highest cost, single cost in the district when it comes to purchase services.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Any other discussion? Jessica?
We had significant discussion about the last transportation contract at the board table, and so I agree that I think it's a good practice. I think even more than that, based on how the costs have been increasing, we have an obligation to look across that landscape right now and see if there's anything we can do to decrease costs in that area, or at least, as you said, slow the increases. So that's why I seconded that motion.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Michelle?
It's like a half derailment of the train. I just want to know if there's an app still for
There is.
parents. Okay, because it was Zonar like last year, but it doesn't.
It's not Zonar anymore. It's My Stop,
Okay.
and it's on our information's on our website.
Gotcha.
And if you have questions, I think there's a number on there to call transportation. You should be able to get the information you need.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay. Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Director Hennekens, you're excused for the moment. Next, we have the resolution to combine precincts for special elections with Stephanie Alvarez.
Okay. Chair Mueller, members of the board, Superintendent Simic, this evening I'm here seeking an action to a resolution to combine precincts. This is an annual resolution and a cost-saving measure.
Great. Thank you. I will go ahead and read the resolution. Resolution for establishing combined polling places for multiple precincts and designating hours during which the polling places will remain open for voting for school district elections not held on the day of a statewide, county, or municipal election. Be it resolved by be it resolved by the School Board of Independent School District Number 13, State of Minnesota as follows. 1, pursuant to the Minnesota Statute, Section 205A.11, the precincts and polling places for school district elections are those precincts or parts of precincts located within the boundaries of the school district which have been established by the cities or towns located in whole or in part within the school district. The board hereby confirms those precincts and polling places so established by those municipalities. Pursuant to the Minnesota Statute, Section 205A.11, When no other election is being held in a school district, the school board may designate combined polling places at which the voters in those precincts may vote in the school district election. 3, by December 31st of each year, the school board must designate by resolution combined polling places. The combined polling places designated in the resolution are the polling places for the following calendar year unless a change is made. 1, pursuant to section 204B.172, or 2, because a polling place has become unavailable. 4, if the school board designated combined polling places pursuant to this subdivision, polling places must be designated throughout the district, taking into account both geographical distribution and population distribution. A combined polling place must be at a location designated for use as a polling place by a county or municipality. 5, the school district must have organized into separate board members elections district in school districts that have organized into separate school board members elections district under section 205A.12. A combined polling place for school general election must be arranged so it does not include more than one board member election district. We then have our combination name, which is ISD 13P1, Valley View Elementary School at 849th Avenue Northeast, comprised of city precincts, Columbia Heights Precinct 1, Columbia Heights Precinct 2, Columbia Heights Precinct 7, Columbia Heights Precinct 8, Fridley, Ward 1, Precinct 4, Fridley, Ward 3, Precinct 3, and Hilltop Precinct 1. ISD P2, Highland Elementary School, 1549th Avenue, Columbia Heights Precinct 3, Columbia Heights Precinct 4, Columbia Heights Precinct 5, Columbia Heights Precinct 6, and Fridley, Ward 2, Precinct 3. 6, pursuant to the Minnesota statute section 205A.09, the polling places will remain open for voting in school district elections between the hours of 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. 7, the clerk is directed to prepare a map illustrating the boundaries of each combined precinct, to post the map of the combined precincts and in the administrative offices of the school district, and to file a copy of the map and a certified copy of this resolution with the county auditor of each county in which the school district is located, in whole or in part. 8, as required by Minnesota statute section 204B.16 subdivision 1A, the clerk is hereby authorized and directed to give written notice of new polling place locations to all registered voters in the school district whose school district polling place locations have been changed. The notice must be a non-forwardable notice mailed at least 25 days before the date of the first election in which it will apply. Can I get a motion to adopt the resolution of combining the polling places?
So moved.
Laura, and a second.
Second.
Ooh, a second by Jessica. Is there any discussion? Mary?
I just want to be explicit. I know that you said that, but I also know that the city of Columbia Heights has a special election coming up. This does not have anything to do with that special election. It's only for school board and school-related things. So any other special elections are not.
Thank you. Yes, good clarification. Any other, Laura?
I was going to say, and in addition to that, it has to be directly school, but this is only if we have a question or an election on the ballot and we are the only ones. This does not affect any other elections.
Okay, thank you. Jessica?
And at this time, we're not anticipating that that's the case. We just need to pass this resolution on an annual basis to allow us to do so in the case that that became an issue.
Yes.
And
you.
this is a yearly resolution.
I was gonna do it.
So no, we're not telegraphing anything.
No, this is a yearly resolution. if we
Yes,
don't
and I think that
adopt it.
that's an important discussion because we are coming off of having a special election. We
Right.
don't want the public to think that we are anticipating another special election. We do this every year in case, as Jessica said, there is a special election for the cost-saving measures that we combine polling places. Excellent conversation. Thank you all. Any other discussion? All right, this is a resolution. Mary, do the roll, please.
I would love to. Mueller.
Aye.
Palmer.
Aye.
Poole.
Aye.
Petway.
Aye.
Maderis.
Aye.
Granlund. Aye.
Thank you. Resolution passes. Thank you, Stephanie. All right. Next on our agenda is closed session. The board will vote to move to a closed session for the purpose of negotiation strategies. For those that are streaming, watching our streaming, we will not return to streaming after the closed session. The remainder of the meeting, which is board topics and adjournment, will be recorded and posted later, but we will not return to the live stream. So, May I please get a motion to move to closed session for the purpose of negotiation strategy?
So moved.
Mary, and a second.
Second.
Second by Michelle. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Back to recording. We are returning from closed session at 10 PM. We were closed for the purpose of negotiations strategy. Next on our agenda is board topics. Any board topics?
I mean, I was gonna say we can either go over them quickly or we can just put it in the packet. I don't know what you guys would prefer.
If you want to just go ahead with the.
Okay. I mean, it's not super crazy. So we really are trying to get together the community engagement part of it. And I did make a list for everyone of all the schools as well as Columbia Heights activities, so their city activities and community things like the library. I'm working on Fridley now, so I'll have that added on there. They don't have too much, but they do have some things coming up for the winter months. But our question is, how would we like to access that as board members? So that we can each update it as we need to. Right now, it's in Excel as a doc in there. But will we be granting access to that so people can go in and put their name by something? Or would it be a physical sheet? Or, what would work best for everyone? I guess we're trying to get a rein on that. So any thoughts on that?
I feel like we kind of did something like that originally where, when Natty was here in chair, she was like, all right, these are things coming up and who's signing up for them. And we did that, and I think every work session, or at a work session, something. Do you remember this?
So a month at a time?
Well, the
would work?
focus is a little bit different
Yeah.
this time. It's more of these are things outside, in and outside of the school district that we may want to consider going as a school board.
And they're not mandated, but we would like for everyone to commit to going to a couple of
But
things.
if all 6 of us are going to be at the same
Right.
place,
Yeah.
as a school board member, it needs to be posted.
Right.
So we need to know who's
Yep.
going to be there if we're going to go above quorum, so.
If they're doing school board business, I mean, we can all
If
show
we're
up at a
going
community
as
event.
a school
Right,
board
yeah.
member, we are doing school
Yep.
board.
Because we spoke about wearing our shirts, wearing badges, things like that, to where, because we're going out into the community, no one knows who we are really. And you're not gonna go out and just announce yourself or hold a sign up the whole time. I'm a school board member, so we were talking about having some sort of uniformity to it.
I would think if we could do that at each work session, kind
Yeah.
of look at what's coming up.
Cool.
I think that's helpful.
I like the transparency of that because we're generally, we're there, and then we can all have a discussion about oh, I'm going to go to this, my kid's in it, or whatever.
Would that be something that, would it be easier just to have the month to month, or have the month and then the next months too, so you can see what's coming up? Because I have them in 2 months.
Yeah, I think
Intervals.
that's helpful.
Okay.
I think the more time,
Right.
we can put on, and if
Awesome.
something
All right, I'll
wants
work
to
on
add
that.
something, that they can, but I think, 2 months.
Yep.
I
All
just-
right. Go ahead. Yep.
I just want to point out that I don't necessarily participate in those community things as much as maybe you guys do. And I don't want to be judged for that, in a sense that, I know that everybody here pretty much has kids in the school district. And my life is less involved with school in general. So I just wanted you to know that I try, but it isn't something that I'm going to be jumping into a community
That's fair.
thing because I do
Having-
have other
We're
obligations.
having a lot of things outside of the district, so that's the whole point, we are on a school board in a school district, but we also, we have, the liaisons between the cities. We're doing Fridley activities. I know you're in Fridley more. So, it doesn't have to be this huge commitment where you're showing up and staying for the entire event and staying for hours at a time doing things. But we want to have a school board presence out in the community too. We already have it in the school district because it's our schools, So we're trying to expand that so that people can see us, know who we are, know what we do. And so it's not really, it's not like we want you to just be all in like that, but, I mean, just maybe attending one thing here or there, just to get out there, or even at, you know, you have a school that you're liaison to, you know, they have a lot of events, and just going to one thing, you know, exploring that school, speaking to the principal, and, you know, just getting out there a little bit more so that our presence can be known in the district and the community. It's important because that's what we're trying to grow,
Yeah.
right?
I
So
agree.
it doesn't have to be
I
like
just
10
wanted
things.
everybody to know that.
Yeah, thank you.
I think we all serve as board members differently, right?
Right.
And I think that we have to represent populations and constituents and do that in terms of what works for us. I think where we come together is our board goals, you know, that we had, you know, we do have a board goal related to, you know, community outreach. And it's part of our equity statement as well. And so looking at that piece of it, but how you do that is going to be different than how I do it or how we do it. So it's, as long as we're together achieving our goals that we agreed upon, I think how you do that is different.
Yeah, I mean, and I would say, like, I attend things that my kids are not in very purposefully. And I think that because I think it's one thing for us to not judge, it is another thing for the community, because they see who comes out to things, and so that's, you know, at the end of the day, it's gonna be what the community, like, what their response to it is too. So it's like having that conversation with the community and the constituents that we serve, for sure, too.
Yeah, and Julie, you're connecting in ways that we're not connecting because of
absolutely.
the connections you have and the activities that you attend. So I think that we all bring that to the table.
Absolutely.
It's really just a matter of getting out into the community. And this was just kind of like a, you know, well, you know, Gloria knows about something and, you know, is going on over at the city, and you know about something that's going on over in Fridley, and let's just let everybody know if they can go. That's awesome. If not,
Yeah.
No, I
it's
like
just
the
one-
idea.
Huh?
I do like the idea of getting the list of, you know,
Yeah,
kind of
that's it,
the
yeah, because you
events.
can just say, you know, I'm not doing anything, you know, this Thursday evening. You know, it sounds like a great time.
And also to keep you informed, you know, because since you don't have children in the district, you may not know all the things going on all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that go on in
a nice
Columbia
list.
Heights.
All right, so I'm going
That
to,
was fun. Yep.
in that one, yes, that's
So
one.
you gonna do the next one?
Yeah, I was hoping that one wasn't that long, but, so we also are still exploring the listening sessions and the interpretive listening sessions. We would still like to have both of those, to still have our English learner families and Spanish-speaking families come. So we are probably going to, well, Jessica will probably speak to you, Zena, about how to set that up and how to get a hold of our liaisons at the schools and how we would move forward with that, but also setting up the other one too sometime soon. We kind of, it's like we're trying to prioritize because we have all these ideas, but there's only so much time to do things in. And I'm just going to bring up the work session thing as not something that we're trying to implement right now or trying to do right now, but coming up in, like, you know, next school year or something, we were actually thinking that maybe we could move the meetings to, like, the school. So when we do, like, a school tour, maybe we have our work session, you know, at one of the schools, or, you know, we could have, we spoke about having staff come. We could, you know, make it open to everyone. We know the people whose children attend the schools will most likely attend and things like that, but just getting people to come out more, because I know we're not coming to them in the community sense, but we're coming to them in the way that they're comfortable in that setting. And we feel like more people would attend, you know, certain meetings if it weren't always in this location. So we did explore that a little bit, just as an idea. So we want to revisit that for sure. But I hand it to Laura now.
Yeah, the work study, we had done that in the past. Were you on the board when we did that before? Yeah, we went to each one of the schools. I will say that one thing that I would like to probably see is to ask the principals of the school, what would be a good Tuesday for you? And do it then. You know, because it's a lot of work to be able to set up for that. Okay, well, we also were continuing on doing some sort of community education with regards to school board and school board governance. And some of the discussion went around with maybe what we should do, because I think we all agreed that kind of ultimately what I have in my head is a lot of work, and I do not want to dump that on the school district. I think we need to grow it. I think we all agreed we need to grow it. Start someplace, start small, okay? And then add to it as time goes by. So very much like the informational session that we provide for the school board candidates during election would be probably a good place to start, and then gear that towards more of the community type of a deal. You know, this would be a session on how the school district works. They'd get a little certificate and all that other stuff, and would be able to learn a little bit more about how it actually operates, because we have a lot of misconceptions. I mean, obviously, we just heard a whole bunch of them, you know, this
Absolutely.
today, and how that all, you know, where is the money? This is how this works. This is where you find it. All sorts of different things, and then really also, I think, really concentrating on our Spanish community, and trying to find ways of being able to participate more fully. Maybe we might want to do something like that in Spanish. Specifically, you know, I mean, these are just kind of, we're still in the kind of thinking about it stage. But I really love the idea of having some sort of a camp to train school board members, so that they have, I mean, they can govern in the way that they see proper, but making sure that they have enough information so that they can participate. This is a community board. This is made up by average community members. There is nothing other than us being community members that makes us qualified to be on this board. And that's kind of the message I'd love to see going forward. But that's, like I said, it's in the planning stages, and you know, what is not going to be overly burdensome for the district staff. So.
Great.
Growing ideas. It's like growing ideas.
Yeah, great work for you guys so far. Appreciate it. Any other board topics?
Go robotics on Friday. That's it.
I just have one other, as our next meeting is our organizational meeting, I would like to have you all mull over changing our board start times from 7 to 6. And that's something that we do at the organization meeting. So just toss that around, as it is currently 10:13, and we've been having longer board meetings of starting those earlier. So just a thought. Put that in your brain for the next few weeks, and we'll meet again in January.
I actually love the idea.
I'm like,
too. But we'll
don't
go,
hate it.
we'll just go an hour longer anyway.
Any other board topics?
Don't hate it.
There's 2 concerts this week, one in the high school on Wednesday, the middle school band on Thursday. Please come. It's a pretty great time.
13th and 14th, yep.
Awesome. All right, then we are going to adjourn the meeting at 10:13.